Hi everyone, welcome to the Art of the Possible series. I'm Nihali Niyogi and I'm a principal cloud solution architect here at Microsoft focused on advanced networking. This is part 3 of AI's Foundry, which used to be AI Studio before, so AI Foundry networking. And today's topic is going to be focused around network and security. So if you've been following along with us, these are the topics that we have covered in the past. So we finished in the first two videos, we finished these three topics, and today we will uncover this new topic, which is secure access to the on-prem resources. We'll do a quick recap of the part one and part two, given some of the branding has changed and some of the screens look different after AI Studio became AI Foundry. And with me, I have a few of my amazing colleagues that I would let them introduce, and we're all going to work together to share some valuable insights on security and networking. So with that, Amanda and Gabe, Nitin, welcome. Gabe, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Nahali. My name is Gabe. I'm a senior technical advisor on the Azure AI CSS team.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Wong. I'm a partner solution architect, and I specialize in AI and machine learning.
Hi, I'm Nitin. I'm a platform architect at Slalom and working with Nihali, Amanda on the customer side for setting up the platform.
Excellent. Thank you again, Nitin, for joining us. Nitin is from our partner team, and so we'll have great insights to hear from him as well. So with that, let me start with the architecture diagram. It's, so if you've been following along with us, this would look very familiar to you. This blue box being Azure, yellow box being on-prem, and we call this a hybrid cloud architecture connected, on-prem connected to Azure using ExpressRoute. Now, the Azure AI Foundry networking options of interest are shown over here. Today we'll be focusing on private with approved outbound. We did go into the details of all of this in part two, so I'll quickly run through this today. So imagine that you have an existing infrastructure, you have some PaaS services in Azure, and now you are deploying AI Foundry. So now you have AI Foundry, and the flows will look something like this. So you want in a secure, when you secure it with private with approved outbound, the external user can no longer access AI Foundry. And the best way to access that would be to project the private endpoint, and then this user from on-prem can access it, and this user from within the Azure VNET can access the AI Foundry Studio. And of course, there is the optional DNS element that needs to be configured if you are coming from on-prem. And be sure to check out the previous video for the completeness. I'll just flash this layer where you could configure hybrid DNS properly to work for you to resolve the AI Studio DNS bits. And next thing you would want to do is also project your AI service into the customer's VNet, and that's the private endpoint that's deployed over here. Now, one of the very useful element that we have, and we'll look at it in the AI playground as well, is that you can deploy to Webapp directly from playground. So when you do that, and you can see that I'm lighting up this little Webapp icon over here, So from the playground, when you deploy to Webapp, you do have to do VNet integration. So you integrate the VNet with the web subnet, and then the web flows work something like this. The user hits the web app, and the web app in turn, through this VNet integration, hits the AI service private endpoint. Okay, so that's the web app integration piece. And then now let's introduce the compute. So when you deploy the compute, there are a few private endpoints that are at play. So for the compute to talk to any of this PaaS services, we have a few private endpoints that are projected in the managed VNet, and those are displayed over here. So these are in the managed VNet, and again, there's a ton of private endpoints that get deployed, and you can also project these AI search and storage endpoints in the managed VNet. And the last set of private endpoints are these PaaS services can be projected in the customer's VNet. So once you have all of these private endpoints ready, there's one more that I may be missing here. Oh yeah, you could project these as well in the customer's VNet. So now none of the PaaS services are exposed to the public internet. And once you have all of this, you have a secure setup with managed VNet, and the external user can no longer access any of the PaaS services. So that's where I will pause before we kind of go and look at the portal experience. Any thoughts, Gabe, on the overall architecture here?
I think that you did a phenomenal job explaining this portion. I think it's very important to emphasize that the managed VNet is only applicable to the compute resources that are created in AI Foundry. So any serverless computes, any compute instances, online endpoints, those would be deployed in a managed VNet. The users themselves still need to access the Foundry and its resources via their own virtual network.
Great point. That reminds me of a layer that I almost missed. So like Gabe mentioned, that this compute resources, so all of these private with approved outbound, that setting is applicable when you are egressing from the compute to the internet. So I used to have a flow here, but maybe I could build one on the fly. But the idea is that this compute reaching the internet, and I will kind of be brave and do it in real time. And that's the flow of interest as well. That when you egress from the compute, there is a firewall that gets deployed behind the scenes, and so there is cost implications for that as well. And we do have a layer of managed endpoint that Gabe mentioned. So just for completeness, the managed endpoint gets deployed in the same VNet as in the managed VNet. All right. So with that, I'm going to jump. So everything that you see in the architecture will jump through, jump on the portal and look at the portal experience. So with that, Gabe, I am going to kind of start with the official Azure documentation, and then we'll look at some of the tabs that we have open. So over to you, Gabe.
Perfect. As you can see here, this is our main documentation for securing Playground with AI Foundry. You'll see there are quite a few steps. If you see in the article snippet, there are 8 more parts to it. A lot of it is securing the network or with private endpoints for specific resources such as search, key vault, storage, as well as the roles that are required for this access to work. So if we go to the assign roles to resources portion, you'll see here we have a table with all the roles that are needed for each specific resource and to which resource it needs that role for, right? We covered this in our previous videos in more detail, but I would like to mention it here again because this is very important for allowing Playground to work. Okay. With that said, most of the rest of the documentation will cover creating the private endpoints, both for your own VNet as well as the managed VNet, and ensuring that the trusted services are enabled for the other resources so that the ML services can access them as well. Okay. Any other thoughts on the documentation itself, Nahali, or shall we go to the portal?
No, I think you covered it. The only thing I would say that if you're missing any of the roles, be sure to check out the previous video. We did like deep dive troubleshooting techniques in there as well, because you will see errors if some of this setup is missing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Cool. So if we now go to the AI Foundry or the Azure AI Hub, here we see
AI
if we can
Hub,
go to
right?
if we go to the hub, you'll see on the Essentials tab, you'll see the default resources that are associated with it. For example, you'll see Key Vault, the storage, ACR, App Insights. Those are all resources that come with the hub. Now, if you go to networking here, this is the main thing that we've been doing. And one of the first things we want to ensure is one, that public access is disabled. Otherwise, there's no point in adding all these private endpoints because the access would be public anyways. So first, we always want to make sure that the public access is disabled. And then with that, we can go to our private endpoints tab. You'll see there are two private endpoints here. One, the first one at the top, the SysP, will get automatically created when you provision to manage network. This will be for your compute resources to access the workspace or the AI hub. The second one, this was created by Nahali for access from on-prem as well as from the customer virtual network. Okay. Now on the third tab, Workspace Manage Outbound Access, this is the tab that is used to configure all of the manage VNet, all of the private endpoints, any rules we want to add. If you notice here, there are three options: disabled, allow an internet outbound, and allow only approved outbound. We're working with allow only approved outbound. If you use allow internet outbound, you'll see that there's no option for firewall, and you won't need to add any FQDN rules because that access to the internet is public, right? Uh, with that setting, you won't be able to connect to on-prem either. So if that is your goal, I would recommend using allow only approved outbound. You'll see here one of the differences we have from the last time we did this is we added a firewall SKU option. So to save costs, you can select the basic option. Otherwise, you can continue to use standard. Um, a few things to call out. If you go scroll down here, Nahali, on the required outbound rules, there are a lot of them created. Most of them are private endpoints to the default resources. So for example, Key Vault, storage, ACR, the AI hub itself, those should all get created um, with the managed VNet because those rules are required. There are also a few additional service tags added because our services require access to ARM, to batch, node management, Azure Machine Learning Services itself. So there are a few other service tags that are required here. If you look at the user-defined outbound rules, A few of the ones we added are one for AI services. The AI services is where you'll see the OpenAI models hosted, where so we need to create a private point to it as well. You see one for search, um, for all the indexing as well. And there's another private endpoint creating that we will talk later, which is to the app gateway. So we won't go over it now. Okay. Any other thoughts on this, Nahali, that you'd like to add?
No, that was perfect. Thank you.
Cool. If while we're here, let's go to a few of the other resources. So um, let's open any, yeah, let's start with any of the other tabs. We can go through them. Perhaps we can start with the AI services. Um,
The AI service. This
yeah,
one.
so AI services here. And if you go to resource management and click on networking, you should see similar thing here. It is disabled, and as I mentioned when we were talking about the documentation, it is crucial that you do have the allow trusted services enabled. Otherwise, you will start facing some issues there. And if you go to the private endpoints connections tab, you'll see again the same similar thing that we saw previously on the hub, which is one, we have the private endpoint for the user virtual network, and then you also have the private endpoint for the managed VNet. Notice there is a difference on this one. Since this was a user-defined outbound rule, the name shows up as the name that you gave to it. In the hub or key vault, you should see the sysb naming convention, which those are created with the required outbound rules. One thing to quickly point out here is that if you go to identity on the left side, some of the roles that we were talking about, you'll be required to enable the identity here to grant it permission to other resources like search and storage. Okay, let's go to some of our other resources. If you look at here, this is what happens when we try to connect to the AI hub with the public network access disabled. Right now, where Nahali is accessing from does not have connectivity to the virtual network, and we will show via a VM later as well the connectivity to the workspace. So let's go to some of the other resources. AI services, which we just went through. This is ACR. ACR for Playground itself should not play a factor. As you can see, this one has public network access enabled. Under private access, we should still see the SysMP created, but given that it does have public access enabled, there's no private endpoint created for the user virtual network right now. But this is not coming into play for Playground, so we don't have to worry about it. If we go to the next tab,
Oops.
and this
So this is a different one. So let's start navigating from
yeah,
the
let's go
resource group,
to
maybe the
yeah, that'd
resource
be
group.
perfect. We can go from here as well. Either way, we can
Mm.
go to the storage account or the key vault. This should be
So storage account. Up there.
I see
The
the key
storage
vault, yeah,
account. Yeah.
and the storage, perfect. Okay,
So I'll just
so
open both.
sounds good. So storage account here, if we navigate to security plus networking, once again, we have the access disabled. One thing to point out is that you will not see the trust services here when you click on disabled. This is specific to storage account. But if you select enable from selected networks, uh, the second option,
Yeah.
Yes, and you scroll down, you should see that the exceptions part for Azure Services is selected. If for some reason this is not selected in your scenario, just make sure to switch it to from selected networks, save, and then go back to disabled. That setting will persist on the storage account if you had it previously selected and then changes it to disabled. If you go to private endpoints as well now, there should be 4 private endpoints in the scenario because we use both blobs and files for the storage account. Files you'll see be used especially for the notebook. That's where all your code would be stored. So you have a file private endpoint and a blob file private endpoint. Okay. Same thing. We have one for the customer VNet and the 2 system private endpoints created for the managed VNet. Okay. Now, if we go to Key Vault and go to networking, looks a little bit different as well. If we go through to the first box on the Manage Public Network Access, we will see the same thing with exceptions, allow trusted services enabled, and we have the public network access disabled here. If we then go to the private endpoints tab, you should also see 2 private endpoints created. One is the system PE and one is for the customer VNet. Last but not least, there should be a search service as well for Playground.
We have it in here, have it somewhere, but let's navigate it from the resource group.
Perfect. Search service, yes. Okay. If we go to networking and perfect, and once again, disabled the exceptions allowing trusted services. With the private endpoints, we should also see 2 PEs. In this case, we will not see a system private endpoint, so this will not get created automatically for you. You will have to create this on the managed VNet portal via the AI Hub. But once again, we have 2 private endpoints, one for the managed VNet and one for the custom VNet. Similar to AI services, we will have to have identity enabled here for those uh, additional roles and permissions. So just ensure that one, you have an identity and that it does have all the permissions to AI services, to storage. I recommend either looking at our previous video or following the table that we have in the documentation. Anything else, Nali, that you'd like to add?
Oh, you covered it well, Gabe. I'm just going to check to see if anyone in the to see any raised hands. Yeah, I don't see it. Yes.
Yeah, one thing
So
I would like to add, Nehali, is that when provisioning these like container registry or AI services, you should like at least use like basic or higher tier for AI shared service and premium for the container registry to fully utilize the private endpoint functionalities for these resources.
Yeah,
yep.
that's an excellent point. You might face some issues if you don't have a premium ACR because you cannot create any private endpoints on the basic SKU. So thank you, Nitin, for pointing that out.
Yep. Great call out. So should we jump on to the VM? Like we said, we're currently on the
Yeah,
outside. Yeah.
that'd be good.
Yeah. And so kind of picking up where we left off real quick here. So I'll put you in the quick in the playground, in the chat playground.
One thing to notice very quickly is that we no longer see that error message when trying to access Foundry. We see here we do have access to the playground now. It is because we're accessing from a VM that that is in the same network as those private endpoints that we created for the inbound access from the customer VNet. So here we already set up all of the indexing, and if you want to know how to do that, you can watch the previous video, but we are using a GPT-4o deployment, and we have a index created already that will do the search, and we're just going to do a simple query to see if it can fetch and summarize the data that we passed on.
Yeah. So
There you go. It's,
so some, and then the two
and then the
references.
references. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then this deployment, this is that AI service, and for completeness, if we look up that AI service, we see that it resolves to a private endpoint, right? So this is where we left off in the
We covered it.
previous video.
Perfect.
All right, so we have Amanda, who's going to kick us off with some insights on AI Foundry. Amanda brings a lot of background on AI, so again, great insights that she has to share. So Amanda, over to you,
Yeah.
and you can share your screen when ready.
Thanks, Nahali and Gabe. I can speak at a high level to some of the use cases that we have. I'm going to start sharing my screen in a moment here. So within AI Foundry, this is really the one-stop shop for AI and particularly generative AI development. So I'm going to speak mostly around this slide here. What are the use cases for using Azure AI Foundry? When I say one-stop shop, what I mean by that is that you can implement solutions using the latest Gen AI models through one platform. And the goal of AI Foundry is to bring in all of the components that you need for an intelligent application, from development and testing and evaluation to deployment through the whole pipeline, whether it's through the Studio UI or the SDK. And so here are some of the top use cases, and I'll highlight the ones that we've been seeing the most from an enterprise standpoint. The ones that come top of mind are chatbots and virtual assistants, and this is usually to increase operational efficiency, provide recommendations, and offer grounded answers for customer service, for example, or traversing over domain-specific documents, whether it's in healthcare, legal, and manufacturing, for example. So with typical RAG patterns, retrieval augmented generation, usually there are several components involved, especially when grounding on customer data. As you can see here, another use case is analyzing and summarizing documents. Within Azure AI Foundry, you can connect your data, whether it's in Fabric, Cosmos DB, or SQL, and connect it to a large language model to play in the playground, for example. And that's some of what Nahali has been showing earlier as well. So within Azure AI Foundry, you can also access our Azure AI services, including document intelligence. Document intelligence being our PDF reader from other files as well, in addition to PDFs, to extract structured information from unstructured documents. And you can apply a lot of AI services to that, such as keyword analysis, sentiment analysis, vision, speech to text, like all of that can happen within Azure AI Foundry. And so with the RAG pattern, what is critical for a lot of our enterprise partners to consider is making sure that these endpoints are private, to make sure that there's no public access, and to make sure that the Azure AI services are still able to communicate with one another to ensure that data is secure in transit as well. So I'll pause there. That is a high level of what we're seeing with our partners. And all of this, again, is possible within Azure AI Foundry. And Nahali is going to talk more about how to continue making a secure environment through other opportunities as well. So I'm going to hand it back to Nahali who may talk more about prompt flow as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Amanda. Great insights from the field and use cases. So let me share my screen again. I'll set it up for Melody to demo the prompt flow. But real quick here, coming back to the architecture diagram, the prompt flow and the access to the private endpoints that will be needed are all the flows that I'm showing um, in the orange. So that's where the integration points are, if you will. And we will then jump on to the VM where we will run a demo prompt flow. And Melody is going to walk us through that. So let me set it up for you, Melody. Here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nihali. So PromptFlow is a tool for your LLM ops development, especially when you want to iteratively integrate your model parameters and prompts. So to work in AI Foundry PromptFlow, first we want to make sure our compute resource is set up. So if you go to like the AI Foundry compute
When we
and
do, yeah.
okay, yes. Okay, it's running, so perfect. We can go back to the project and go to the prompt flow. And here, if you hit the plus create button, you are able to see these are the prompt flow library where you can just reference or clone these pre-built flows that include standard flow, which captures the prompt design and customer data set incorporation, and chat flow, which take into consideration of chat history, and evaluation flow, where you can set evaluation matrices and compare the different outcomes. There's more in the Explore gallery where you can filter if you want to have a specific type of flow, and it will provide you with more granular, detailed use case of the prompt flow scenarios, and which you can also look at the details or even clone it and start your own flow design. So today we are going to look at a flow that we've already created. So to give you a sense of how to work with the prompt flow tools here. So if we go back, yeah, and so this is a standard flow that we have created. Going into it, we can see this is the user interface. On the left-hand side, you will see this is the design pane, where you can add all kinds of tools like LLM tools, prompt tool, and Python tools, including input and output. And on the right-hand side, it is a graph where you are able to locate your resource. So let's start our compute session first. Awesome. And it will take a few minutes to start. So let me walk you through what is in this now. So this is the input, which is the user's question or prompt that they will put to the LLM to make it generate any answer or value that is related to a certain theme. So here we have the value as track knowledge. And then the output is going to be what the large language model will return based on the prompts and also the tools that we include. So below that is this Python module where we imported a tool from PromptFlow, and we add the instructions there as well. So it is able to echo the input and return an output accordingly. And then the next module is Joke, which is a LLM tool where we able to configure the connection. So this specific connection, sorry, yeah, for this specific connection, you're able to configure it in your private network, and you can select the deployment name, and also some additional hyperparameters as well. So the connection is private endpoint integration point in this prompt flow, and then in the prompt part, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the integration point that, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Nihali. And then it is a prompt part. The prompt is very crucial to the behavior of the large language model. So you can see here we have a very simple example. For the system prompt, it prompted to be a bot that can tell good jokes. And then the user's prompt is just a joke about the topic. The topic is in our input. So, okay. So, while we're waiting for the compute session to start, we also can take a look of the output that we've already run previously. So you can see here, the LLM gives out a joke that is related to tech knowledge. It says, sure, there's one for you. Why did the computer get cold? Because it let its windows open.
Yeah, and the technology was set up in the input section as the string.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once the compute is running, this run button will get light up, and so in the interest of time, we already ran it and we have it over here.
Yeah, perfect. And do you want to also look at another example?
Yeah, let's look at it while, so maybe we can go over it. We'll leave it running here, and if you want to talk through.
Awesome. Awesome. So this is another example, which is the chat flow. What is different from the last standard flow is that it could take into consideration the chat history. So we start the compute session here. And then after the compute session started successfully, we could see the chat button right to it lighten up, and we can start to have that user interface where we can put in question and then have interaction with the LLM. So I'll first go through this chat module with you. So you can see it's pretty similar to the last one. And there's something that I want to highlight is that we can see the show variants tab. Yes. So for LLM development, as we know, different prompts may lead to different types of output. So depending on your specific use case, you may always want to tune your system prompt to get a more formatted answer and improve the accuracy or relevancy of the result. So this is where we can start to play with. So here we are looking at is the variant 0, which is the default one. You probably have set it up based on your use case, but we can always clone it and then make some tweak to it to incorporate some additional requirements.
And we
So,
cloned one already, right? In this one, yeah. So we do have
yes.
another one.
Awesome. So you can see here we add some more descriptions for the system message that your skills are networking and Azure networking in general. You also have a good sense of humor. And another best practice is that in the system message, we can add, for example, do not fabricate anything that is not existed. Always cite your source when you give out an answer. That can also help the LLM to better ground the response. So yeah, so now we have two variants, and we're able to use the flow, and once it runs, we can see the different outputs and compare to see which one is more relevant to our specific use case and decide on which prompt or model or parameter configurations we want to set for our model.
Awesome. Let's see if this one is still with this running. So I think in the interest of time, we can skip the demo for that particular element, if that's okay, Melody, because we do have the one running from before, and we can revisit it a little bit later.
No problem.
Yeah, and all of this happening securely through the private endpoint integrations as well. Anything anyone wants to add? I know, Nitin, you guys use prompt flow as well quite a bit.
Yes, we use prompt flow quite a bit, and one of the things like that, having a serverless compute, it's like take time, so you can definitely provision like your own compute to save like some time on rather than waiting for the compute session to come online.
Yes, that's a great point, actually. So I did want to call out one user experience where I think that's a great call out is when you um,
And I think
oh,
by default, the session time is like 1 hour um, or 30 minutes for the serverless compute. So if you are inactive for 30 minutes or more or 1 hour, it will automatically stop. Then you have to restart the session. That means it will provision a new serverless compute. So
right.
to
And
minimize
then
that,
there's an advanced option that lets you pick your compute, right?
yes.
So you were saying to minimize?
Yeah, I was saying like to minimize, like it's better like if you are actively working on prompt flow and you want to test your flow, it's better you can provision like your own compute and then have that extra time rather than waiting for the session.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And so one of the other things that let's say we create a sample flow just to talk through that point that you're making. So here, if we choose the advanced one, you can pick an existing compute that's already running. And that's a little bit faster.
Awesome.
First,
Nahali, before
yeah,
we
right.
jump, I thought we wanted to do the web app first.
Oh yeah, great point actually. Yeah, so that's a great point. So what um, what Gabe is referring to is we deployed the web app here and we want to show you the VNET integration and the web app flow. So this user accessing the web app, and so this green flow is what we are going to show you. So great point. So now from the playground that we are here, you could directly deploy to web app. So there is a deploy to web app button, and deploy as a web app. And as a sample, we deployed a web app. So let me take you there, Gabe. And the way we'll do this is let's navigate it from here. Yeah, we deployed a web app called Network Architect, and we gave it in the chat playground, we gave it a prompt that you are a network architect. And so this is the web app. So here we already have a web app provision. And just to recap, I did a deploy to web app over here. And here I gave it a prompt that you are an AI assistant and you are skilled in networking and you have a good sense of humor is the prompt that I gave it. All right. And then I did a deploy to web app, and that's this web app right here. So with that, I'll just go to the networking tab, and you could see that it is a VNet integrated, right? So it's VNet integrated, so it can talk to the AI service using the private endpoint. And then anything else here, Gabe, that you want to call out on this section?
I think it's important that this has to be configured by the user. So when you click the deploy to web app, it will not be done automatically. And you'll have to add the virtual network integration portion here yourself.
Exactly.
Ni-
Yeah, and it's
Nitin?
publicly accessible. As you could see, it's enabled for public access. So if I go in here and I click on this, if it takes time, oh, there we go. And so, so we'll give it a prompt, and we'll say, my network is down. Please help. So it's got a good Bostonian sense of humor because I said that you are from Boston. And so looks like Nitin has a question, and then Amanda, you can go next. Any?
Yeah. So Nehali, can you say like some details on in the playground when you click on export to web app?
Mhm.
Would it have my all the connections information, so like connections to AI services, the models that I deployed, or do the users have to configure them in the web app, maybe like in environment configuration section?
So
So
the environment configuration should mostly be set. There shouldn't be a need to modify any of those. It's mainly the VNet integration that will need to be configured by the user. So when you click deploy and deploy to web app, all of the configurations, all of the environment variables should be already configured.
Perfect.
Amanda, you had a
Yeah.
question?
So Nahali, is anyone able to access this URL given that it is a public endpoint?
This one? Yeah, that's a good call out. I believe the way the default web app is done, it's AAD integration. So you have to log in with Azure AD credentials. So if you try to hit it, it will prompt you for login. Great question, though.
Got it. Okay, so I have to be part of your tenant in order to access it?
Yep, that's
Okay,
how it's done.
thanks.
Yep, so that's a great integration with Azure AD as well. And the other thing, so Nitin, that you can do is if you go to, let's say we go to the development tools and we go to the bash. So this is a good troubleshooting if you want to see that your private endpoints are working and that everything is working correctly. You are now in the uh, in the all right. Maybe some of the tools are not installed, but at least you could do, let's see if NS lookup is installed. And you can look up, let's see if we want to look up this from the perspective of the web app. Uh, demo gods here, so we'll see. Oh, there we go. So it does resolve to a private endpoint. So from if you had more integration points in your web app, so going back to the drawing board, if your web app needs to access, let's say, AI search, so this private endpoint, right? You can test that all out to make sure that your DNS resolves correctly and any of the troubleshooting you could, if you had more integration points, you can do it from there.
Perfect. And I think I would like to add, like, if you want to restrict the access to the public endpoint for the web app, you can create the private endpoint for web app, so that won't be allowing accessing it publicly. Then you have to be like in your corporate or enterprise network.
Precisely, yeah. So in my case, I have the public access enabled, but to your point, exactly right. You could create a private endpoint over here, and then disable the public access
Yes. And then that means like either you
completely.
have to be like VPN through like your corporate network or your company network and then access the endpoint. So that's kind of like an extra layer of security in terms of like who can access if you have deployed like a chatbot.
Precisely, yeah. So I should probably add another layer for that flow that Nitin is describing. Instead of this red user accessing the web app, we can project a private endpoint for this web app, and then this user would access that private endpoint. Great call out. Anything else, Gabe?
No, nothing else from me right now. I think it's good.
Excellent. Yeah, so now let's talk about this new feature. We didn't have this covered in our previous video. So here what we're looking at is accessing on-prem resources from Azure. And mind, when we say Azure, we're talking about the compute over here. So essentially you are in this managed VNet, you're still in the allowed only approved outbound setting, and you want to access, let's say, an Artifactory or a Snowflake database that's sitting on-prem. We didn't have that functionality before, but today we're going to showcase this new feature. So for that to work, let me first show you in the architecture diagram. This is the official diagram, but I'll show you with the flows and a little bit of the animation. So what happens is for this compute instance to access this artifactory, that's the flow of interest. What we do is we have an app gateway in the mix, and we will project the private endpoint for the app gateway into the managed VNet. Now, remember that app gateway, we do need to enable private link service first, and then you can project it in the managed VNet. And once that is done, the flows would look something like this. I know there's quite a few flows here, but what will happen is this pink flow would become the flow of interest. So from compute, you would hit the private endpoint for the, let me hide some of the private endpoints that are not at play right now. Uh, so from the compute, you would hit the private endpoint for the app gateway, and the backend to the app gateway will be one of your APIs or your Artifactory. Okay, so that's your backend. So I'll have you take this, if Gabe, from here. Let me light up the app
Perfect.
gateway.
So as Nahali was mentioning, for you to access any on-prem resources from the managed network, we do require an app gateway to access it. And basically, there are a few limitations with the app gateway. One, we will only support IPv4 addresses, and two, as Nahali had mentioned, only HTTP or HTTPS protocol will be supported on this. Okay. First, when we do this, we want to configure the application gateway, right? Setting up all of the basics, ensuring that it's in your virtual network, that it's IPv4, as we had just mentioned. All of these are very important. If we go to listeners, that's good here.
Yeah, and then back. Yeah.
Yeah, we can start with the backend. Do you?
Yep. So
Perfect.
anything that says AI Foundry is the one of interest. I do have other pools, but the one that says AI Foundry is the one of interest.
Perfect. And basically, if we click on the AI Foundry pool here, we should be able to see. If you click on the three, yeah, okay. You can see the target that is in this VM, and that's how you basically configure the backend for it. If we go back, you will also see a few listeners that are configured. Basically, these are the HTTP or HTTPS rules that we want to set up to allow the access to your on-prem resource. Okay, if you want to add any sort of encryption as well, any end-to-end TLS encryption, you can add your own certificate. It looks like you do,
I've added.
Bas.
Yeah.
Perfect. So you can see here, Nahali added a certificate to this to allow for even more secure um, traffic flow here.
And it
Okay.
is required, right? As HTTPS is required for.
So HTTP is supported as well. It's either HTTP or HTTPS. If you want to use HTTPS, obviously we would want to have those certificates. But there are two protocols that you can use, HTTP or HTTPS. It does not have to be HTTPS.
Okay, got it.
But,
Yeah.
but any other protocols that will not be supported in this scenario. Okay. Um, anything you want to add here, Nahali, or anyone else on the listeners?
The rules maybe just for the completeness. So I do now have the rule that stitches everything together. So the listener and then the backend target that we just looked at, and I'm not doing end-to-end TLS, so you can see that my backend setting is on port 8080. So for completeness, I'll just show the backend setting as well. So that's this guy.
Perfect. And if you go through our documentation, it goes into detail on how to set these up as well, on how to configure your application gateway. So that would be important. Great. Um, now that you configured it, what we want to do is configure the private link for it. Excellent. Yeah, so let's say you created your front end and back end pools. What we want to do now is create the private endpoint from the managed virtual network to the application gateway. So if we go back to the Azure portal to the AI Hub, you will see that we created a role, a user-defined role, to the application gateway. Here it should be that second one. You see the connection name under user-defined roles. That second one should be the manage VNet role. This is so that the compute resources in your managed virtual network can access this application gateway and then access your on-premises resources. Okay.
Yeah, so this the resource. So when you drop down the destination as private endpoint, you will see your application gateways. And what I found really cool, Gabe, was that I can also put an FQDN over here and it honors it on the compute. So that's really cool.
It's very nice. One thing to note is none of this will work with Spark as well. You can see on the workspace outbound role creation, there's a box for Spark enabled, but this is not supported with Spark or any of the Spark scenarios. So unfortunately, if you're trying to use any Spark pools and connect to any Artifactory on-prem, that will not be possible. So this is only supported with your regular compute instances, manage online endpoints, etc. Okay, perfect. So yeah, once you create this, that should be basically the full setup. You create the application gateway, set up all your backend, front-end pools, your listeners. Then you create the outbound role to the application gateway, and you can see here, here it is the managed VNet private endpoints created. Notice how we don't have any private endpoint for ourselves since we are not directly using this application gateway. There's no need. So we only created one for the managed VNet because those are the computes that will be accessing the on-premises resources. Okay.
Yeah, and you do have to accept this. So once
Excellent.
you go ahead, once you add this outbound rule that Gabe mentioned, you have to come back to the application gateway and accept the private endpoint.
Cool. One thing to note as well, a few things. If you're using certificates, right, or HBS listener, we want to ensure that one, the FQDN matches the CN of the certificate, or if you or the SAM, that's very important. Otherwise, you may have HBS calls failing with some SNI errors.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
important, but it does commonly happen that, either a typo or whatever may have happened that those are not matching. So please make sure those do match.
Yeah, so for the listener, where I did set it up, it's a wildcard certificate for penguintrails.com. And if you noticed in the outbound rule, I had it set up as on-prem.penguintrails.com. So good point.
Uh, Now that we configured this from on the managed net as well, we can go ahead and test this on one of our computes. Holly, if you want to bring up one of the computes that we have for accessing the on-prem using app gateway.
Sure, yeah. So should we test the backend health real quick before we go
Sure,
there?
let's check that.
So for the backend, I do have a little program that's running, which is basically just a simple Python-based server listening on 8080. So that's what I have for backend, and looks like it is healthy. So Gabe, I am now in the compute here.
Perfect. And this is one of the computes that we created in the managed virtual network. And we just want to test that it does, in fact, have connectivity to that East VM. So we're doing a curl command to the FQDN added on the managed outbound role. As you can see here is the on-prem Penguin Trails.
Trails.com.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
And you can see the response is provided. So meaning it does have connectivity.
yeah, and for completeness, we'll just do a quick NS lookup. I thought I had it in my history. If not, I can get it again. Yeah, there. Yeah, and it indeed resolves to a private IP. And just for the completeness of the recording, this is the private 10.1 network, which is in the managed VNet, and the compute itself is in the 10.2 network. So if we go kind of look over here, the compute itself is in the 10.2 network and the private endpoints. Let me just light up. Yeah, 10.1 network. So what we just resolved, we did an NS lookup. We just resolved this one right here.
Perfect. Nice.
Nitin, I know you had a question here.
Yeah, and before that, I would like to mention that this could be a really beneficial if you have like an artifacts like on your on-prem. So if you can integrate App Gateway with the AI Foundry, you don't have to go to the public route to access your on-prem artifacts. That's like a best security practice if you don't want to expose your services to the internet. So rather than, for example, these JFrog Artifactory or Snowflake databases, um, rather than opening an FQDN rule in the AI Foundry firewall, you can deploy an app gateway and then access these artifacts more securely.
Excellent.
Yep, great.
Excellent point, Nitin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one question I had like about the whole connectivity is that App Gateway is only required to access the on-prem resources from AI Foundry. For the other way around, like from on-prem network to access the AI Foundry, we won't need the App Gateway. Is that correct? Or can you provide more information that what are the best practices?
That is correct. So for intent on the app gateway, yes, you can still have the on-premises connect to it, app gateway, and then it route back via the managed VNet. But for just general access, no, you do not need an app gateway to connect. Basically, how you would secure that is via the private endpoints and your own custom VNet. Uh, on premises specifically, you usually have like an express route or some sort of network gateway to connect to the Azure virtual networks. And so once you connect to the Azure virtual network, if that network, if you have private endpoints that are peered or are in that network, you should also have access from on-prem to the AI Foundry, right? So when we were going over these resources at the beginning, we noticed that there were two private endpoints. One of them was from the custom VNet. And basically, if you have one additional step here, which would be either ExpressRoute or a VPN gateway to connect to Azure, then you can access from on-prem to your Azure resources without needing to expose it to public or using App Gateway.
Perfect.
Right. And so one of the best practice as well, like in addition to what Gabe mentioned, like have a dedicated private endpoint subnet for all of your sort of private endpoints, right?
Yeah, makes it
And
easier to manage.
right, yeah, yeah. And that's this flow of interest would be this flow. So initiated by this user going in that direction, right? And to your point earlier, like the return traffic would go back to the app gateway. So for the flow that is the one that's from, so that's the previous flow, right? So if we talk about this this pink flow, the return traffic will go back to the app gateway because it's a layer 7 proxy, and it would NAT it to the IP of the app gateway. And you can see that in here. So when it hits the downstream VM, you'll actually see the IP of the app gateway. So the return traffic knows how to route back for this flow. Okay. So
That's
yeah,
good to know.
yeah,
So both ingress and egress traffic is going through the private network.
yes,
Yep.
exactly.
And can you also show that we created and managed outbound rule for app gateway in AI Foundry networking?
Mm-hmm.
Dan, can you show that how to create that?
Yeah, sure. If we go back to the hub on the networking tab, okay, where's the
Okay, so
hub?
let me just go to the hub again.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, on the hub itself, if you go to networking and if we go to workspace managed outbound access, here we have a user defined role that we want to add. So if we click on, this is the rule that we already created, right? You can see all the configurations. If
oh,
you
you
want to
want to
add a
create a
new
new
one,
one? Yeah, okay.
right. If you click on the new one, you'll see here the destination type is a private endpoint, and what we want to select as a resource type would be the application gateway. Um,
Since I already have it, Gabe, you wouldn't see it here, but maybe that's why we should go into an existing one to show
Yeah,
right
that's
here.
perfect. I think it was the resource group was different. So you can see here is common RG is where the application gateway
Oh,
is.
okay, so let's do that. Good call out.
And yeah, if we go to common,
Ah,
yeah.
okay.
So we should see the resource type application gateway here. So just make sure that both the subscription, the resource groups are correct, and you should see the resource type um, there. And then you can select the resource, the specific resource, add your own um, name for the role, and add the FQDNs necessary or places that you want to connect to.
Perfect.
And
This,
and I think the key is that you have to create the private link service first for this sub resource to light up. In other words, you have to be the order of the flow, and it's documented um, in our official Azure documentation, but you have to grab this information and
yes.
drop it in here. See?
Oh, excellent point, Nahali. Great, good
Mm,
call out.
So good. So, Gabe, I think we're nearing almost the last bits of our session. In the previous one, we missed in our part 2. We didn't get to the point of managed online endpoint. So just for completeness, let me hide some of the flows here. And we'll deploy the managed online endpoint. So from a placement perspective, the managed online endpoint sits right in the managed VNet. And we have two types of access. This green flow is what we call the public access. And then you can also do this other green flow where you can access it privately. So you get two options with managed online endpoint. Anything, Gabe, you would want to add in the managed online endpoint before we
Um,
go in the hub?
the best way to secure any managed online endpoint is with managed VNet. Um, so I think it's very important if you want to use this service and you want to keep it secure is make sure you enable managed virtual network. It will allow those endpoints want to access any of your restricted resources and will also allow you to have control of what it can access as well. So you can go and create any of the roles added to the managed virtual network would also be applicable to the managed online endpoint. And as Nahali mentioned, there are, right, that the managed VNet would be covering the outbound access. So let's say you have some Snowflake repository on-prem and you connect it to your app gateway and you need to access it from your managed online endpoint, you'd have to use your managed VNet to do that. But for the inbound access, that would be from your own custom VNet if you disable it, right? So I think we have a demonstration for that as well, Nahali.
Yes. So we'll demo this flow right here. So I've created two managed online endpoint, Gabe. So if I go in the, let's see, endpoints, you would see that I've created two. And let's first look at the private one. And
This.
yeah, this is the private one, and it says public network access is disabled. And we can test this using, typically we would be able to test it, but because we have private endpoints enabled, we're not able to do it in the portal. So what we've done is, if you go to the consume point, you could grab the REST endpoint and the API and the authentication key, and then we can test it that way. All right. So I just took the simplest Python code, converted it into a curl command, and we're going to demo that. Anything here, Gabe, before we go to the demo?
I think that's good. If we go back to details, maybe
Yeah,
we can
yeah.
cover a few things.
Mm-hmm.
On the right side, you'll see the target URI. That's the REST endpoint that you'll be using at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, any calls to the endpoint will go through that. Obviously, if you have the access disabled, that means you would be using your private, your AI Hub private endpoints. The AI Hub private endpoint has a specific FQDN that all your managed online private endpoints will resolve to. It's a wildcard and it simply appends the name. So if you have any custom DNS configuration set up, we want to make sure that that one FQDN of the private endpoint resolves to the private IP so that when you go and try to connect to any of your managed online endpoints, so for example, this target URI, that when you do an NS lookup, the CNAME, which is using the private endpoint FQDN, is resolving privately so that you can also access it privately.
Great call out.
So
Yeah. So I am on that VM, and
yes,
yeah, and it does resolve.
and if you look at the canonical name there, you can see that it does have that, on the non-authoritative answer, there is a canonical name or CNAME, which has the endpoint name appended to it with the workspace GUID.inference.ecs.privatelink.api.azure.ml.ms. All of your endpoints, or all of your managed online endpoints in one workspace will be resolving to the same IP. So we just want to make sure that this each of the CNAMEs are correctly resolving, right?
Yeah, and great call out, Gabe. I think for completeness, maybe just show the private private
Yes.
DNS. We did cover this in the previous, the asterisk, the wildcard, but this is in the ML.
Correct.
So we'll just showcase. So yeah,
And
this
if
is
you
the,
see that first one, right, you have the wildcard dot workspace GUID dot inference dot east west, and any new managed online endpoint will replace that wildcard with its name, and it will always point to this .6 address in this scenario, right? In this case, yours may be different, but um, in our lab, this is the IP.
Yeah, and for completeness, this VM that I am testing everything from is this VM right in Azure so that it has access to this private endpoint. Okay, so we're running all of the tests from there. So with that, Gabe, I think I have a script that is ready and I could, we can test it out. So you do have to set some of the variables. You have to grab the access token. We'll echo the access token. We can see that we now have the access token. And then we'll create the, I think this one's missing a little bit of the, okay, so let's see. Setting the scoring URI, and like Gabe mentioned in the portal, this is the URL of interest, the target, and then we will run a curl command. Of course, you could do it programmatically using other, oops, so this one's not doing the wraparound properly. And we will just finish this like this. And so in this one, it just says, so this is just telling us a joke. So, and for my request.json, I just kind of kept it sample request.json that we have. It's just empty.
Excellent. That's good. Nice. We get a proper response, and we're always happy with that.
And maybe we should just show where the managed endpoint deployment is. So I was in the prompt flow, and the way I deployed it is I was in the standard flow, and there is a deploy button here that tells you if you want to deploy it to new, and the setting is right here where you can toggle the public versus private. And that's how you would deploy the managed online endpoint. And that's why it's, sorry,
No,
Gabe?
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so it was just the standard joke, the standard flow with the joke that I had deployed. But go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say one thing as well. I want to show if we go to the endpoint itself that we already deployed.
Endpoint, sure.
Yes, the endpoint. If we go to
The private
VNet.
one.
Yeah, sure. One thing to call out is you see the logs tab here at the top. If for some reason there are any issues with your deployment and you need to review it, go to the logs tab. This will have a lot of information on the actual container that is getting deployed, and that should help you debug any scoring errors or anything that may happen. One of the things you see here is one of the earlier messages. There was a 401 error, which was a permission denied, most likely because the token was not getting passed correctly, right? But you can see that if I try to score it and it didn't work or the deployment failed, all of these, you can find it right here on your logs.
Where was the 401 error?
Right where you are, if you go
Oh,
back.
okay, sorry. Okay. Gabe is the troubleshooting master. He sees things.
It's like the sixth line under message. There's a message error code 401 from the top. So from the top right now, the sixth line starts with message error code 401 permission denied. Right. Um, there was an authentication error that when trying to access this endpoint that happened, and so you should be able to see these in the log here as well.
Yeah, no, logs are always great.
Yes.
When things are not working, right?
Yeah. In this case, we're all good, so no worries there. But in case you may run into any issues with the deployment or when you're trying to score it, it's just a tool to use to help you troubleshoot.
Excellent. And so we did the private endpoint, and this is the public, likewise the public endpoint, public network access is enabled. And then if you go to the test, you can't test it here because we have private endpoints. And then likewise, I did this exact same thing, a test from an external machine. So in other words, I was here and I accessed the managed online endpoint, and that works as well. Anything, Gabe, you want to call out? Do you want to demo the public as well for completeness?
Yeah, let's demo it just to
Okay,
so we have
so
end to end.
yeah, so here I was in that VM, and so maybe I can exit out of that VM, and I do think I have a script here as well. And so if you notice, my endpoint name has changed. So let me make this bigger to see if it does do the right thing. It looks like, yeah, so I will change my things here. So the biggest difference here is my endpoint name is now public. And so we have the access token. Let's grab the scoring URI. Sorry about the wraparound. Somehow it's missed. We'll echo the scoring URI. We'll NS look up this. And this is, like I said, I'm on my laptop, not VPN'd in or anything. And we look up this. We expect a public IP. And then we can grab, oops, sorry, the curl command here. And there it tells us a joke. And I don't have anything in my sample request. I just have a blank JSON that I have to pass. I'm passing in. So it tells us a joke. And again, it was also done using the standard flow, which the default is, tells us a joke.
Excellent.
So, anything else, Nitin? You have any other questions, ideas for future sessions?
Yeah, for future session, would you like to cover server-side encryption of metadata and using customer managed key for AI Foundry? Those are like, I know one of them like is in preview, but that's something I think enterprise customers would like to see.
So you're talking about, if I'm not mistaken, and help me with this, I think you're talking about, so let's go to the AI.
Yeah, these are when you create a new AI hub,
Okay, yeah,
you get those options under
okay,
encryption. Yep. The middle one use server-side encryption and using
That's
the customer managed key for AI Foundry.
Do you see this in the field? What are your thoughts, Gabe? Is that something maybe in the future we could look into that as well?
Uh, yeah, sure. CMK is always something that customers are interested in. Anything for additional security, right? So
I think
uh,
it would be like if you have like customer who are like more interested like in creating their own customer managed key rather than having Microsoft managed key for these services, um, they can definitely leverage this functionality to bring your own customer managed key for encrypting your data.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that would fall a little bit over here. I think we're covering the network security. It would fall probably,
Data
I think,
protection and encryption would
right,
be
the
the case.
next. Yeah. No, totally. I think this would be something we can. Oops, sorry. So this we will be expanding our, I guess, sessions into the next actually, right?
Yep.
Because we finished this one today. We did a lot of troubleshooting throughout the sessions, right? We kind of baked it into our sessions. So, yeah, definitely, Nitin, the great idea. Anything else before we call it a wrap? Let me just take a look at my. We did cover outbound a lot in our previous sessions as well. So I think we're so now kind of lighting up all of the layers just for fun. So we now have everything covered here. All right. How is this spaghetti mess for fun? Oh, we have everything working end to end. All right. Well, thank you, Gabe, and thank you, Nitin. It was really a pleasure working with both of you, and I want to thank Amanda and Melody as well. Brought up some great points for a complete demo, both from not only a network perspective, but also bringing in like a data architect perspective. Nitin brings a partner perspective. So really enjoyed working it with all of you. Any
This
last
is
thoughts,
no, it
Gabes?
was very good, very excellent. I think recording. Everyone here is very knowledgeable, so it's good to have different perspectives and insights from everybody. Really, thank you, Nali, for putting it together.
Yeah, thanks, Nayali. Thanks, Gabe. It was really great and helpful to see these new features.
Excellent. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you in the next video.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.